I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. We're starting in Salem because, well, you might have heard there's a little issue in the Senate. Republicans have walked out and stopped all work. Yeah, still nothing happening, and less than a month until the session ends. So we're going to sit down with the Senate President, Rob Wagner, to get his take on what's not happening and how he sees this all ending. Rob Wagner's first elected office was the Lake Oswego School Board in 2017. The next year, he was elected to the Oregon Senate. This is his first year as Senate President. He has a bachelor's degree from Portland State and a master's from George Washington University. His roots in the legislature are deep. He worked as an aide in the House in the late 1990s, then spent a decade working for a teachers union, then was VP at the College of Advancement at Portland Community College. He no doubt hoped this would be a productive first session for him as Senate President, and for a while it was. But since early May, there's been a lot of this.
Colleagues, a quorum is not present. A quorum is not present. A quorum is not present.
Oregon is one of a handful of states in the country that require 2/3 of lawmakers to be present in the House or Senate to have a quorum and conduct business. Most states just say a majority of lawmakers have to be present. In Oregon, that means 20 senators must show up or no work can be done. Republicans have used that as a tool to stop the legislature every year since 2019. This year, they focused much of their outrage on House Bill 2002. It would clarify a hazy part in Oregon's abortion laws and allow young women under 15 to get an abortion without their parents' permission. The bill also requires insurance companies to pay for gender-affirming care. Senate President, thank you for being available. Appreciate it.
Thanks for coming down.
You betcha. So, we're well into the walkout now. How's this thing end, you think?
Well, honestly, Pat, I'm hoping that it ends with people coming back into this building and we go onto the floor and we do what the voters have sent us here to do. And that is consider bills and vote them on the floor.
So what's it take to get people to come back?
I think we're still in conversation with a lot of people. Ultimately, though, it's going to be people in communities and having conversations about why it's important. Why do they trust their democracy? What do we do here? And how they need to just come back and be able to participate. That's what the Constitution requires people to do.
So you're saying voters in the areas where the Republicans are need to start pressuring them to come back?
I wouldn't say the word pressure. I think it's just really important that people understand what we do in this building that impacts their lives. Right now, we have committees that are passing budgets for education and senior services and infrastructure. We have bipartisan bills that are just stacked up and waiting for people to vote on. I think when we get the message out about what actually happens here, that people are going to want to come back and do their constitutional duty and vote on bills.
Well, we'll see. But ours have said we will come back and vote on those bipartisan bills, but you won't touch 2002, right?
No, we've been pretty clear about that, actually, since the beginning of session. And really, when you look at voters and what they're asking us to do, ever since the decision that overturned Roe v. Wade, Oregon voters have said we need to protect access to reproductive health for women in this state.
But are they saying that people 15 and younger need to be able to get an abortion without their parental consent?
So I think
are they saying that?
Yeah, so I think it's important when you look at 2002 that what that bill actually does is clarify and codify 50 years of Oregon law that has been there since Roe v. Wade passed.
And I understand that has been the practice in some areas, but in other areas not so much. OHSU has it on their website that younger than 15, you need parental permission.
Yeah, I'm not a technical expert on this. I certainly can put you in touch with Senator Steiner or Senator Lieber or others who, have practiced in this space. I do know that my understanding of that legislation is that we need to make sure that women have access to reproductive health care. That's what this bill does. It's not expanding any rights. It's clarifying the fact that Oregon is a pro-choice state and that we're making sure that women are protected.
Is there any scenario in there that you see a compromise within that bill?
No, the bill is set to go. So right now, we have a very robust committee system in the state of Oregon, probably more robust than any other state in the entire country. That bill had months of work leading up to the legislative session. It received a hearing in the House. It received a bipartisan hearing through the Ways and Means process. It has received a floor vote in the House where the Republicans, I do want to note, stayed and they had diligent debate and raised a lot of questions. And then they voted on it. And that's what people are asking the Republicans in the Senate to do, is to come back and vote on that bill.
But are you willing to drive the session off a cliff for that bill?
Well, I'm not driving anywhere off a cliff. I can tell you this, that Oregon voters are expecting us to be here session after session voting on legislation, and that's what we're committed to do.
You've been in this legislature during other walkouts in the past. Does that color sort of the way things are going now?
Well, I think it's, you've seen a pattern that
For sure.
we've seen the minority sort of weaponizing the quorum right now.
One of the few states in the country where they can do that.
Absolutely. And so it's disappointing as someone who's been around the process as long as I have and just loves our constitutional democracy. At the same time, I guess the question was, does it sort of color my experience?
And does it give you any insights into how you can navigate through this?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's really important is that we've established a very clear tone, and the voters are fed up with it. When Measure 113 passed this last fall, it passed with over 68% of the vote, and it passed in every single state Senate district. And so what I think the voters were clear as saying is people need to not get paid if they don't show up to work, and they need to be here and voting on legislation that mattered to their lives.
So that did pass, but it's not having an impact on this session, and it's not going to get you out of this jam.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see. I think there's still 30 days left in the legislative session, which for us is a really long time. And so we're just going to have to see how that plays out.
All right, but just to be clear, no way, no how you're moving at all on 2002?
No, that bill is definitely set. That is definitely for our members. It's a bright line. Women need reproductive health services in Oregon. We are not going back on our commitment to codifying Roe.
Although, just one last argument along those lines.
Sure.
Just intellectually, women are able to get abortion services in Oregon right now.
Yeah,
even without that bill.
Yeah, again, I'm not the most technical expert on it. I would definitely have you talk to Senator Steiner or Dr. Steiner, or, somebody like that. But my understanding of the legislation is that what this does is it makes sure that there's insurance protection, that we're making sure doctors are actually covered for the services that they're providing, and that there's another element of this bill which I think kind of sometimes gets ignored, and that is having access to gender-affirming care. And so I don't want to ignore that. I think it's really important that we've heard from constituents how important that is as well.
All right. What about the other bills that seem to be sort of on that kill list, as I understand it? That'd be the gun bill, and I'm spacing on what the third one is.
Yeah, there's legislation that, and again, I don't know if you've seen a list. We haven't seen a list, but even with that, I think people are done with sort of backroom deals where people are putting together kill lists on legislation. We're asking people to be really transparent. If they have objections to particular legislation, then make your argument. Make it in committee, make it during an election cycle, make it here, and make it on the Senate floor. So in terms of these kind of backroom deals around kill lists, I think people are done with that. We want legislators from all over the state to come with wish lists. We want them to show up with things that they want to work on together.
Well, the Republicans would wish that you'd move 2002 out.
Yeah, well, like I said, I don't think that's where the majority of voters are. And that's not what they sent us here to do.
Okay. As time goes by, I wonder if the pressure increases on you from your constituents saying, fix this, figure this out.
Yeah, I mean, I will say.
What's that like?
Yeah, and my constituents have been very clear that Oregon is a pro-choice state, and they support that legislation, and they support the position that we're making right now.
But is there a growing pressure on you to try and figure out a solution before the session's done?
Not that I felt.
Huh, okay.
Yeah.
And do you worry that as time goes by that your own members might have second thoughts? We've seen that happen in past sessions.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, you can talk to members individually, and what's nice about the Oregon state legislative process is that I'm here as the Senate President. I kind of have a job in helping the Senate sort of function, but every individual senator has the opportunity to bring the values from their constituents forward and have that robust debate. That's why we have a democracy.
Well, you have a team, but you're the coach, right?
I don't necessarily think that that's an apt characterization. I think it's more just maybe if you want to say a facilitator, that's fine. But I'm not putting individual people in and out of the game. Everybody's in the game. Everybody's here to play because their voters sent them here.
Fair enough. By the way, I have talked with Senator Steiner. She's a medical doctor and a sponsor of HB 2002. I've also talked to the folks at the Department of Justice. They helped inform my understanding of the bill, all those people. I also want to say thank you to the Senate President for taking the time to sit down with me one-on-one. I think it's really important for you to hear from him and to understand kind of where he's coming from in a longer form interview like this. It's impossible to share that same understanding with short sound bites. I think that's one of the things that makes this show unique. And if you like it too, please tell your friends about us. It's a big tent. Everyone's welcome here. We have a lot more from our conversation with Rob Wagner that I'll be sharing tomorrow night. By the way, yes, I did ask the Republicans in the Senate for the very same opportunity. I hope to put many of those same questions to them, but they did not agree to an interview. As of tonight, by the way, there are 27 days left in the Oregon legislative session. So, what do you think of our conversation so far? Do you agree with the Senate President? Or are there some things you want to argue with him about? Or do you have other thoughts on all of this? Send them to me. You can email me. The address is thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. I look forward to hearing from you. And while we're talking about the Senate, that walkout started 4 weeks ago. And lots of bills have passed the House, but are now waiting, stuck, trying to get into the Senate. Evan Watson breaks down a few of the bills that are on the chopping block as long as this walkout goes on.
First up, Oregon senators need to approve bills to address Oregon's drug and fentanyl crisis. One would fix issues with the rollout of Measure 110 and support treatment and recovery programs throughout the state. Others would expand access to Narcan, an opioid overdose reversal drug that can be used to save people's lives. Next, Oregon has a shortage of public defenders. Sometimes cases are dismissed because there's no lawyer available to represent a defendant. Other times, defendants unnecessarily wait in jail for months before getting a chance at a hearing. Senate Bill 337 addresses this system. And a bill from the House would change how crime victims are treated and compensated. It passed with unanimous bipartisan support. And Oregon lawmakers need to figure out how to fund the I-5 bridge replacement. If Oregon doesn't work out its $1 billion contribution, that could put federal funding at risk. And as a top priority, lawmakers need to pass major budgets for schools, housing, government, and other areas. The group of Republican senators is also protesting the passage of other bills, ones that would provide abortion access for all ages and gender-affirming care, regulate guns, and enumerate marriage for all. Republicans have said that they'll return on the last day of the session to pass bipartisan budgets and bills, but Democrats have said they won't let that happen, saying Republicans in the minority don't get to pick and choose what goes through. So as it stands, the sides are still at a stalemate.
Tonight, we remember those we've lost, the ones who made the ultimate sacrifice for our country.
We're here as Oregonians, we're here as Americans to be so grateful.
When we come back, how we're observing Memorial Day today, and we look back at how it became a national holiday when the story returns.
This is Memorial Day, a time our nation pauses to remember those who have died protecting our country. A number of observances were held today, some small and private like this one, others very large and public. This came to us from Stevens, Oregon. It was filmed above the Columbia Gorge east of Crown Point. Now let's move east to the tiny town of Wasco. It's south of the Biggs Junction on Highway 97. Population 410 people. Thanks to Kevin Massey for this shot. And now to Salem, where the Oregon Department of Veteran Affairs hosted the annual statewide ceremony. It was held at the Oregon World War II Memorial on the grounds of the state capitol. Deputy Director Nakia Council Daniels, an Army veteran, urged those gathered to remember the many who died for America.
On Memorial Day, we as a nation pause to remember those who made the ultimate sacrifice. We stop to honor and pay respects to those who gave their lives in service to this country, in service of freedom, in service of a more peaceful world. We remember their sacrifice, their valor, and their grace. For while we stand amid monuments of stone, we must never forget that each of the names forever etched in granite, those known and unknown, represent a precious, valiant life.
So well said. Bagpipes and a 21-gun salute made up part of the ceremony at Willamette National Cemetery. Many of us personally know someone who's made that ultimate sacrifice. If you'd like to share, we'd love to hear their stories and see pictures. You can send them to us at thestory@kgw.com. But for now, let's go back in time to see how Memorial Day came to be celebrated in the U.S. with a look at how we got here.
Memorial Day as we know it didn't officially become a federal holiday until 1971, but it has a long history before that. So, how did we get here? Humans have been honoring their fallen soldiers for thousands of years, at least since the ancient Greeks and Romans, who held Remembrance Days every year. In the United States, different communities started holding their own version of Memorial Day during the Civil War. One happened in 1865 in Charleston, South Carolina, when recently freed slaves organized a ceremony to honor fallen Union soldiers. In other cities, women came together to decorate graves. It became even more common after President Lincoln was assassinated. In 1868, the leader of a group of Northern Civil War veterans designated May 30th as Decoration Day. Northern states made this a holiday, but Southern states chose to honor fallen Confederate soldiers on a different day. After World War II, more people started calling the holiday Memorial Day. In 1968, Congress decided to make it a federal holiday on the last Monday in May to create a three-day weekend. That took effect in 1971. So what's the difference between Memorial Day and Veterans Day? Memorial Day honors soldiers who have died in battle, while Veterans Day honors those who are still living. Veterans Day on November 11th coincides with the end of World War I. On that date, just to make it a little more confusing, the UK and other Commonwealth countries hold Remembrance Day, which is more like our Memorial Day here in the US. And that's how we got here.
I hope that helps explain it. Still ahead, the story of a Portland couple who found each other after decades apart and the incredible thing they had in common.
It's just so funny that we ended up together. Like, it was so meant to be.
I guess so. Turns out they grew up in two houses miles apart, but oh, how similar they were. We'll explain what happened when we come back.
Next at 6:30, a day to remember and to enjoy the company of family and friends. Matt is here to show us how the unofficial first week of summer is now shaping up. And that warm, dry weather also means rising wildfire danger. We're going to show you where firefighters already have their hands full. Plus, the Ducks and Beavers begin their quest for the College World Series. Art has a preview at 6:30. Hope to see you then.
Tonight we're continuing our series Pacific Storyland. We're off to meet a Portland couple who you might say was destined to be together because of where they grew up. But like many true great love stories, at the heart of it, it's not as simple as it might seem, with a couple of decades and a twist of fate making things really interesting. Catherine Cook and photographer Corey Long bring us the tale of two houses and one love.
Sally Tappinen and David Faraday share a lot of history.
She knows Kelly O'Connor.
Yeah. Both went to Lincoln High School.
Look at those legs. Dang. I was like lean, mean.
In the 80s.
I'm still mean, just not lean.
Still lean and mean. Both had been married before.
I thought I was sort of, the last chapter of my life had been written.
Then found love again.
I remember thinking, love is never going to happen for me.
And both were raised on the same foundation. Really?
These were old houses.
Identical homes.
And they had the same footprint, the same outside.
Built 6 miles apart.
And it's just so funny that we ended up together. Like, it was so meant to be.
Sally grew up in this house in Northeast Portland's Irvington neighborhood.
I took the bus, 2 buses, the 9 that went downtown and another bus to get up to Lincoln.
It was during that morning routine that Sally first noticed her house had a twin. Back in the 80s, TriMet used to print photos of historic homes on their bus passes.
I got my bus pass and we're looking and I'm thinking, that house looks an awful lot like my house. And I'm like across the street looking at the house going.
It was the Bennis house in Southwest Portland near Washington Park. David and his family lived here. Architect John Bennis designed the house and lived here first in 1911. A year later, Bennis built the house that Sally grew up in. Not far from there, another Portland icon, the historic Hollywood Theater, which Bennis also designed.
He was quite the architect.
David would know. He's also an architect. So were his parents, who were thrilled to learn of the twin houses. The families arranged to tour each other's homes. Sally remembers.
My parents said, oh, they have 2 sons at Lincoln. I was like, okay, you know.
In high school, Sally and David ran in different circles.
I knew of him. I always thought he was handsome.
But that was about it, until 25 years later, and this chance reunion with David through mutual friends.
And at the end of the night, somebody said, let's all toast to being a single parent. And I raised my glass, and David's like, what?
Oh, why didn't anyone tell me?
After that, one date is all it took.
I looked at him, he looked at me, and it was like, okay, we're done.
Yeah, we both knew.
Most couples don't bring up their past. These guys,
We did. We talked about the house a lot.
couldn't wait.
We talk about, which family member was in what room.
We had the same bedroom growing up.
There was this big old furnace in the basement.
And when you turned it on, it clanked, clunk, clank, clank.
Yeah, if I had friends over, it freaked them out.
In 2015, Sally and David got married, excited to build their own home together. They didn't plan for what happened next.
A year after we got married, David came down with stage 3 cancer.
It was colon cancer. David had just turned 50 and hadn't wanted to get screened.
Basically, I'll deal with it later, and it goes away. Luckily, Sally's like, you got to get this.
At first, doctors thought the cancer had spread to David's liver. The news was grim.
So for about 2 weeks, I thought I had maybe just a few years to live.
I just thought it was so unfair because I'd finally found my person, and I was like, there's no way you're taking my person away from me.
Then doctors learned David had a fighting chance, and fight he did.
But it was a year of chemotherapy, surgery, radiation, more surgery.
Today, David is cancer-free.
This is all just bonus, the rest of my life. When you're, sorry, it gets emotional because you've made peace, with that being the end of your life, and So, yeah, it changes your attitude.
It's hard not to look back on history and marvel at what we've learned.
It doesn't matter what house you're in, but it's what you do inside the house that makes it your home.
The blueprints we tried to follow.
You know, you can plan your life, but just, it's so much of it's luck.
The foundations we build that give way.
She was my rock.
To something stronger. It all leads us down a path we never could have planned. In Southwest Portland, Catherine Cook, KGW News.
What a sweet story. That's the end of our show. Thanks so much for watching. And remember, the story, our collective story, that never ends. I'll see you tomorrow. In the meantime, stick around for the news at 6:30, which is coming up next.